Halloween night, 2016. I wasn't dressed up or out at some party. I was just trying to get home. I'd spent the evening at a friend's house in Lancaster, Ohio, handing out candy to the neighborhood kids. It was one of those chilly Midwestern nights where the air feels damp, but never quite turns to rain. The kind that smells faintly of corn stalks and wood smoke. Around 11:30, I finally decided to head back to my place, about 40 minutes away, out near the county line. My route was simple enough, or so I thought. Highway 33, then a left onto County Road 19, a back way I used to cut through the fields. I remember glancing at the clock when the drizzle started. 11:47 p.m. The wipers squeaked across the windshield, struggling against a mix of rain and road dust. My GPS had already lost signal somewhere past the last gas station, but I didn't care. I'd driven that route 100 times. Except that night, something felt off. I passed a row of mailboxes on my right, old rusted ones, their numbers faded and leaning. A single porch light glowed down the road, and nothing but darkness and trees closing in. The drizzle turned into a steady rain. I slowed down. And then, maybe 5 minutes later, I saw the same row of mailboxes again. I remember thinking, that's impossible. There was no turn off, no loop, just a straight two-lane road. Still, I chalked it up to the rain and my tired eyes. Maybe I was mistaken. Another few minutes, another turn in the road. A faint orange flicker in the distance caught my attention, a light low to the ground. At first I thought it was a street lamp or a campfire, but as I got closer, I saw it was a jack-o'-lantern sitting on a fence post. Its grin had melted in the rain, candles still burning weakly behind the soaked pumpkin flesh. I slowed the truck. There wasn't a house in sight, just fields on both sides. The wind picked up, and my headlights caught what looked like another pumpkin, then another, maybe a dozen of them lining the fence. That's when I realized I'd stopped hearing the rain. No patter on the windshield, no wipers squeaking, just silence, thick and heavy. I could still see the rain, but somehow it didn't sound right. A shape flickered in my headlights, something small moving fast across the road. I hit the brakes. A raccoon, I figured, but when I looked again, there was nothing. No animal, no sound, just the pumpkins flickering weakly on their posts. I rolled the window down halfway, letting the cold, damp air in. I could smell wet earth, maybe a hint of smoke, like someone had burned leaves recently. The silence pressed against me until it felt like my ears were ringing. Then, somewhere out in the dark, a single metallic clink, like a chain tapping against a gate. I couldn't see anything beyond the reach of my high beams, but my pulse started to thump hard in my ears. I reached over and flicked on the dash light, the dull green glow washing over the speedometer. It was 12:03 a.m. Halloween had officially passed into November 1st. I put the truck back into gear and crept forward, eyes darting between the road and the fields. About 100 yards ahead, the fence ended, and on the left side stood an old house I'd never noticed before. It was 2 stories, leaning slightly, with boards over half the windows. A dim light flickered inside, candlelight, not electric. More pumpkins lined the front steps. Something about it felt wrong. The house looked abandoned, yet every pumpkin still burned. I slowed to a stop across the road. The rain finally came back, sudden, hard, pelting against the windshield. Through the downpour, I thought I saw movement in one of the upstairs windows, a curtain shifting, maybe a silhouette behind it. Then my engine coughed once and died. The headlights dimmed, the wipers froze mid-stroke. I sat there in total darkness, engine ticking quietly as it cooled. My stomach dropped. I tried the key again, nothing. The dash lights flickered, but the engine wouldn't turn over. That was when I heard it. Footsteps. Soft, slow, coming from behind the truck. I froze, hand hovering near the center console where I kept my Glock. I didn't pull it yet. I just waited, heart pounding. The steps got closer, crunching gravel. I couldn't see anything in the mirrors, just rain streaking across the glass. Then, a knock. 3 slow taps on the driver's window. I whipped around, and for a split second, I swear I saw a shape, small, hunched, like someone wearing a hood. But when I blinked, it was gone. The window was empty except for the rain. I started the truck again. This time, it roared to life like nothing had happened. The radio crackled, blasting static that nearly made me jump out of my seat. I threw it into drive and hit the gas. As I passed the old house, every jack-o'-lantern flared up bright orange, their flames flickering wildly, lighting the wet steps and the broken door. For half a heartbeat, I thought I saw someone standing there. A woman, maybe, or just the shape of one. Then the rain swallowed it all. I didn't stop driving until I reached the main highway. The digital clock on the dash said 12:51 a.m. When I got home, I sat in the driveway with the engine running, still shaking. The smell of wet leaves clung to my clothes. I didn't tell anyone about it the next day, not because I thought it was supernatural, but because it just didn't make sense. Maybe I'd taken a wrong turn, maybe fatigue had played tricks on me. A week later, I mentioned it to a coworker who'd grown up around there. When I described the house, he went quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "County Road 19, that house burned down in the 90s. Halloween night, family inside, all gone." I laughed it off, told him he must be thinking of another place. But later that night, I pulled up satellite view on my laptop, tracing the road from the main highway. There was no house there, just an empty field, fenced off. And at the far end of the fence, a single rusted mailbox leaning toward the road. I grew up in a small Ohio town where Halloween was a big deal. Haunted hay rides, bonfires, everyone knew everyone. By the time we were seniors, though, the kid stuff didn't feel the same. So that year, 2014, my friends and I decided we'd make our own kind of fun. We called it the Barn Scare. It wasn't supposed to be anything dark, just 5 of us. Me, my buddy Eric, his girlfriend Shelby, and 2 others, Brian and Kayla. We planned to set up fake scares behind Eric's family's old barn. Creepy props, motion lights, maybe one of us hiding in a mask to jump out when the others came through. We'd film it, laugh later, post it online. It was one of those cool October nights when the air smells like cold dirt and old corn stalks. The sky was cloudy, no moon, just the faint orange glow from the town a few miles away. You could hear distant fireworks popping, early Halloween parties down the road. We parked by the field around 9 p.m., flashlights cutting through the mist, and started setting up. Eric's family owned acres of farmland, but the barn itself sat way out past the tree line, surrounded by tall grass and a half-collapsed cornfield. I remember thinking it was perfect, quiet, isolated, pitch black once the flashlight beams cut off. Eric was always the one pushing things too far. He wanted to hang fake bloodied clothes from the rafters, record creepy whispers on a speaker, stuff like that. I laughed and told him to chill. The point was to spook, not traumatize anyone. We had walkie-talkies, cheap Halloween store masks, and a couple of camping lanterns. Around 10:30, the prank started. Brian and Kayla went to the front of the barn to walk through, filming the experience. Shelby hid behind the hay bales near the door. Eric and I positioned ourselves behind the structure, ready to trigger the sound effects and jump out with our props. Everything was fine at first, giggling over the walkie, the sound of crunching gravel as they moved through. Then suddenly, Brian's voice on the radio. "Yo, who's behind the barn? I just saw someone." I clicked my button. "That's us. Don't peek yet." Static, then silence. Shelby stepped out from her hiding spot, whispering, "Did they come out already?" Before I could answer, we heard running. Quick, heavy steps in the grass, moving fast. Eric jumped out from behind the corner, flashlight sweeping. Nothing. Just rows of dead corn, swaying slightly in the breeze. Then a voice called from the dark, "Hey, quit screwing around!" It was Brian, but his voice sounded farther away than it should have been, maybe 50 yards off near the tree line. Eric muttered, "They're trying to mess with us." He switched his flashlight to high beam and waved it toward the sound. The beam cut through the mist, catching what looked like a person standing at the edge of the corn, just a silhouette, still, watching us. "Brian?" I called out. The figure didn't answer. Then, as if the light had startled it, it turned and slipped back into the corn. We laughed it off at first, classic small-town spook. But when Brian and Kayla finally came out from the front of the barn, both of them looked confused and annoyed. "What the hell are you guys doing back there? We heard someone running circles around us." I blanked. "That wasn't you?" He frowned. "No, thought it was you." We all kind of stood there for a second, the rain starting to drizzle again. Shelby's flashlight started flickering. She smacked it against her palm and said quietly, "Can we just go inside? My hands are freezing." We went in, one by one. The barn creaked under the wind, the air thick with the smell of mold and hay. Inside, we could hear rain tapping on the tin roof, steady, rhythmic. Eric climbed the ladder up to the loft to set one last light. I stayed by the big doors just in case someone else showed up. I swear I heard something move behind the haystack again, a soft shuffle. When I looked, nothing. But one of the fake props we'd hung earlier, a rubber mask on a rope, was swaying back and forth like someone had just brushed past it. "Eric, you up there?" I called. His voice came back muffled. "Yeah, just about." A loud crash cut him off. The lantern in the loft fell and shattered, plunging the place into semi-darkness. Shelby screamed. Eric scrambled down the ladder, flashlight beam jerking wildly. "Something grabbed the rope," he said, out of breath, pulled it out of my hand. Brian rolled his eyes. "Man, stop!" Then we heard it again. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, on the roof. One step, then another. metal creaking above us, the sound of wet boots sliding slightly against the tin. No one spoke. The five of us just stood there, staring at the ceiling, hearts pounding. After what felt like forever, the sound stopped. Then something, or someone, jumped down from the side of the barn, landing hard on the grass outside. Eric bolted for the door, flashlight cutting a wide arc through the rain. "Who's out there?" he yelled. Silence, just the sound of the rain hitting the field. We waited, straining our ears. Then we heard laughter, faint, distant, drifting from the direction of the cornfield. A man's voice, but it didn't sound like anyone we knew. Eric turned to me. "We're packing up, now." Nobody argued. We gathered what we could, the lanterns, the camera, the props. When I stepped out into the rain, my boots sank slightly into the soft earth. I noticed something odd. The mud around the barn was full of footprints, not just ours, dozens of them, overlapping, some small, some large, circling the structure. "Did you guys walk around back here?" I asked. They all shook their heads. Brian looked pale. We should just go. So we did. We piled into the car, headlights slicing through the fog as we drove down the dirt road back toward the highway. Nobody spoke until the barn disappeared from view. As soon as we hit the pavement, my phone buzzed. No signal for hours, and suddenly everything came through. Missed calls, texts. One of them was from Eric's mom. "Don't stay out there too late. Sheriff said some drifter's been sleeping in the old barns again." Eric didn't say a word. 2 days later, the sheriff's office found something behind the barn, right near the corn rows. An old sleeping bag, a pile of clothes, some empty cans, and a shallow hole, maybe 2 feet deep, covered by loose hay. They thought it might have been an animal den at first, but there were drag marks nearby and a scrap of blue fabric caught on a branch. The weird thing? Kayla's hoodie had gone missing that night, light blue. She swore she'd left it in the barn. They never found it. A week after Halloween, Eric texted me a photo. He'd gone back to pick up some of the leftover gear in daylight. The picture showed the side of the barn where we'd been standing that night. Right above the door, scrawled in something dark, mud or maybe old paint, were 3 words: "Don't come back." He told me he never went near that field again. Neither did I. And every October since, when the wind picks up and the smell of rain drifts over the fields, I think about that night and how what started as a harmless prank nearly turned into something else entirely, something that was already waiting behind that barn. I've driven long haul for 16 years, and the thing you learn about highways is they're like rivers. Most nights they just move, slow and steady, and nothing happens. But every so often, a bend you've taken 100 times looks different, and the current tugs at you in a way you can't explain. That's what Halloween night 2019 felt like crossing the high desert of northern Arizona. Ordinary miles until they weren't. Dispatch had me pulling a light load of boxed appliances from Gallup to Barstow. Easy run. Forecast said a late fall storm would roll across I-40 after midnight. Nothing dramatic, just rain and gusts. I topped off at Holbrook around 10:30 p.m., grabbed a coffee that tasted like the inside of a toaster, and rolled west. The cab smelled faintly of diesel, cold air, and the lemon wipes I used to keep the dash clear. Radio low, CB on, channel 19, just in case. I had my usual kit within reach: headlamp, small tool bag, tire thumper. I keep a compact 9mm locked in a console safe. Habit more than anything. I've never had to brandish it. Out there, it's more likely you'll need a good flashlight than a gun. By the time I put Winslow behind me, the first drops hit. Thin streaks catching the high beams like lines of thread. The wipers squeak twice before settling into a steady tempo. I don't mind rain. I actually like it at night. The road glosses over and throws back your light, and the world shrinks down to one safe tunnel where you can think. I counted reflective posts, watched the odometer tick, mile after mile, just me and the dim red glow of the instrument cluster, the engine's low hum under my boots. Somewhere east of Joseph City, the CB popped with a little back and forth, two reefers jawing about a costume party at the TA in Kingman. Every October you hear the same jokes. Watch for witches on brooms, boys, that kind of thing. Somebody keyed up and did a Halloween cackle, got told to knock it off, then it went quiet again. Mile marker 44 slid by, then 45. The rain got heavier, not a downpour, but enough to hiss against the wind deflectors. A crosswind began to nudge the box, and I eased 2 fingers on the wheel until it lined up. I was thinking about the cinnamon roll I'd saved for my 10-minute at the rest area past Seligman when I saw it. Hazard blinkers ahead, low and slow on the shoulder. A sedan, late model, silver or white, hard to tell in rain. The hazard strobed orange against wet asphalt. Each flash doubled itself in the reflection. No other taillights for half a mile either way. Breakdown on the 40 westbound, mile marker. I glanced at the green sign, 47. I eased off the cruise and dropped to 45, scanning for movement. The sedan's nose was angled toward the guardrail like it had drifted and corrected. Steam might have been coming from the hood, or maybe that was just rain sheeting off the hood. There was a person out front, I thought. Dark jacket, hood up, arm lifted. A wave. The beam washed over them, and they took a couple steps toward the fog line. You don't play hero on shoulders if you can help it, not with a trailer and weather. But you also don't leave someone stranded at midnight in the rain. I checked mirrors, clear, and stabbed the four-ways. I coasted past, then took a long, shallow roll onto the shoulder 50 yards ahead, plenty of space between my trailer and their car. The tires crunched on the rumble strip, then settled. The engine fan whirred down. The world went suddenly small and hush, taken over by rain ticking, wipers tapping, and hazard lights clicking under my left knee like a metronome. I cracked the driver's window enough to call out, "You all right back there?" The wind pushed fine mist into my face. I angled the mirror and saw the empty silver strip behind me, the sedan's blinkers winking. No one answered. I put the parking brake on, pulled on a jacket and a reflective vest, and slid into the wet. The first breath of rain after a warmed cab always feels like stepping into someone else's lungs. Cool, metallic, clean. I grabbed my headlamp and walked back, careful where the asphalt crowned toward the ditch. The truck's hazards threw red onto the rain. The sedan sent orange in the other direction. Between them, I moved through a little Halloween of color and noise. "Hey," I called, "you need a tow or a phone?" The hood was closed. The driver's door was shut. In the passenger window, a child seat silhouette, empty. My headlamp cut across the glass. The seats were dark cloth, no one inside. The engine wasn't running. The rear right tire looked low but not flat. I tested the front tire with my thumper, reflex more than necessity. Solid. I circled the rear and shined the light into the ditch. Sagebrush, scrub, the vague gleam of pooled rainwater. Nobody there. I panned the headlamp up the slope toward the fence. Wind gusted and the rain came at a slant, stinging my cheek. You can usually tell when someone's close, even if you can't see them. The way sound changes, the pressure of another body near. There was none of that, just highway and weather and my own breath in the headlamp beam. I jogged the 50 yards back and swung my door wide. The cab's warmth hit me with the smell of coffee and damp fabric. I clicked the CB. Westbound 40 near marker 47, got a sedan on the shoulder, no driver. Anyone lose a buddy? Over. The voice answered, "Negative, driver. Been clean since Holbrook. You see footprints?" Footprints? I hadn't thought to check. I keyed back. Stand by. Back out. I tilted the headlamp down and swept the asphalt near the fog line. Beads and slid. If there'd been prints, the rain was erasing them by the second. Still, I found something. Smears where shoe soles had scuffed. Not much, only a couple disturbances leading from the driver's side toward my direction, then stopping. I widened the arc of light, scanned under my cab, checked between my drives. Just rain and dark. I stood there a moment, the headlamp's halo bouncing off droplets, and got that tug I mentioned earlier, the sense that some angle of this wasn't lining up. The sedan's hazards were steady, the wipers were off, the keys weren't in the ignition, I could see the slot clean. Inside, on the passenger seat, a plastic bucket, the kind kids use trick-or-treating, sat empty, handle flipped back. A damp orange ribbon clung to the console. Halloween. The bucket made sense. Parents do late runs all the time. I told myself someone had flagged a state trooper minutes before I pulled over and was riding into town. Maybe they'd killed the blinkers and a timer had rearmed them. Cars do strange things when their batteries hiccup. It still left the question of why I'd seen an arm wave from 10 seconds out. I chalked it up to rain and refraction. Your eyes make people at a fence posts when they want to. I put a safety triangle 10 yards back of the sedan, no harm done, and climbed into the cab. My jeans had soaked at the knees. I set the headlamp on the dash, wiped my face with a shop towel, and keyed the CB. Nothing doing. Might be a ghost car. I'm rolling. 10-4, the same voice said. Keep it between the lines, driver. I pulled the brake, took the tranny into drive, and eased back onto the lane. The trailer's rear cleared the rumble strips with a low shudder. My hazard indicator teched twice more, then I flipped it off. The cab felt almost too warm now. The wipers thunked and hissed. Water flecked the glass like graphite. I checked the mirror. The sedan shrank, then blurred in the rain, then became two orange dots pulsing until the next rise took them away. I settled back into speed. The road opened. The storm thinned enough that the sound softened and the engine note took the foreground again. I put on a late-night AM station out of Flagstaff. A host was reading listener ghost stories with that too slow voice they use when they want you to lean in. I smiled at the coincidence and took a sip of cooling coffee. That's when something thumped on the cab step. Once. Heel heavy. A weight finding steel. The kind of thunk your own boot makes when you climb back in. Except I was alone and rolling 65. I looked left instinctively, toward the mirror. It was only rain and the vague curve of a fender. The door lock, small chrome nub, sat proud just as I'd left it. I told myself it was the wind pushing water in a sheet against the step. Metal flexes. Metal makes noises when you want them to. The AM station fuzzed with static like someone had dragged a comb across the speaker. The host's words broke into hiss and whisper, then picked up again. I reached toward the knob and my knuckles brushed the headlamp I had laid on the dash. It was still on, face turned down, light bleeding into the dash mat. I clicked it off, threw it into the cubby. 2 miles later, the CB crackled with an open mic. No voice, just breathing. Not heavy exactly, not panicked, but right there in the speaker. Close as if someone had leaned in. It lasted 5 seconds, cut, came back for 3, cut again. Then a different driver's voice bulldozed through. "Breaker 19, you got a hot mic, fix your key." Silence. I cleared my throat like the other person could hear me and said nothing. Because what do you say to empty air? Maybe someone had dropped their hand mic onto a seat cushion and it pinned the talk switch. Maybe the breathing was my own fan picking up moisture. The smell changed. I noticed it as something small pinched the back of my nose. Not diesel or wet cloth, but loam, like damp ditch mud, the kind that gets under your nails when you dig out a stuck strap. It faded and then came back stronger on the next inhale, so clearly there that it mapped itself. Dark earth, a trace of sage, the sour metal tang of wet fence wire. The smell lived in the truck for 3 full breaths, then thinned. I checked the floor mat, half laughing at myself. I'd tracked rain in, sure, but I hadn't stepped off asphalt. There was nothing on the mat but water and a little grit. Another thump on the step. This time it came with a faint rattle in the door, as if a palm had set itself there, light, testing. I felt the weight of it through the frame, the way you feel someone's knock through wood. The lock nub didn't move. My thumb found it anyway and pushed it down. A dumb, reflexive act. It was already down. I pushed again. My mouth had gone dry. Stupid. I reached for the mirror adjust switch with the back of my fingers, like if I didn't look straight at it, none of this would be real, and kicked the blind spot out wider. Rain. Roadside grass a smear. No shape. I told myself out loud, it's wind. Hearing your own voice helps. The interior ate the sound and gave nothing back. Past Ash Fork, the storm freshened. Water ran in little rivers along the shoulder. The white lines flashed by like a ticker. Mile marker 53, then 54. The AM station lost its grip altogether to an ocean of static, and I thumbed it off. The CB popped once and went quiet. The cab was tire sound and wipers and the tiny click of the hazard switch spring returning to its place from my earlier use. Everything else was rain. When the weight landed the third time, it wasn't a thump. It was lighter. A heel is set down, and then I heard fabric scuff the door, like someone in a slicker had pressed in to block rain, the way we all do before we pull the handle. A half second later, one metallic click, the handle trying its first detent. The lock nub didn't move. I didn't reach for the console safe. I didn't even think of it. I put both hands on the wheel and held it like a thing that could tell me truth by touch. Every hair on my forearms lifted. I rode it out. The handle settled back to rest. The weight left the step, and the door skin stopped telegraphing that faint pressure. Another smell came in, chasing the mud. Smoke. Faint, like a match blown out, or leaves somewhere far downwind. It lived in the cab long enough to draw a picture. Cold wood ash and the ghost of burnt sugar. Then it went. At Seligman, I took the off-ramp. I didn't plan to. My hands did it for me. The rain turned to fine mist over the little town, and the yellow bulbs of the truck stop lit everything a shade too warm. I rolled into a bay, set brakes, and just sat there until the air dryer coughed out and the dash clicked itself down to quiet. The glass had fogged at my level in a crescent where my breath had lived the last 20 minutes. I wiped it with a sleeve. The world resolved. Pumps, a guy in a poncho walking toward the door, a flag snapping in the wind. I unlocked the gun safe, then locked it again immediately. It felt like the wrong instrument for whatever that had been. I grabbed the lemon wipes and cleaned the door pull as if it were dirty. Half of being a driver is ritual. Wipe, fold, set, check. It gives your mind something to hold on to. When I climbed down, my boot splashed in a shallow puddle that mirrored the truck's belly lights. I rounded the front and shined my headlamp at the steps because I knew I would. There were wet streaks where water always runs off. Beyond that, nothing. No mud, no boot print stamped into the grime. I bent down anyway, touched the painted steel. Cold. Clean except for rain. Inside the store, coffee hissed, and the cashier scrolled her phone. A bulletin board by the bathrooms had flyers: lost dog, church breakfast, a beat-up pickup for sale. A state trooper stood by the counter, steam rising off his jacket. He had that night shift look. Soft eyes, wired core. I nodded. He nodded back. He asked the cashier if she had a different size lid. I don't know why I did it, but I walked over. "Trooper, you got anyone on a broken-down sedan at 47? White or silver? Hazards on?" He glanced at me, then at a notepad he'd tucked under his elbow. "We got a call around 11:30. Unit checked. Vehicle was gone when he arrived. You see something?" "I just saw the hazards," I said. "No driver." He looked through me. "Part of the job, I guess. Measure the person as much as the story." "We get a few," he said. "Halloween and prom nights especially. Kids push a car out for videos, scare their girlfriends. Or someone runs out of gas and their brother brings a can before we do. You keep moving, you're doing it right." I bought a fresh coffee I didn't want and a cinnamon roll I didn't eat. Back in the cab, I turned the bunk heater up 2 notches and listened to the rain on the roof. It came in waves, the bigger drops tapping, then a soft lull, then tapping again. I could have slept right there, but the clock on my eld didn't care about ghosts. I merged back onto the westbound lane, set cruise, and let the truck do what trucks do. The rest of the run was clean. The wind let me be. The rain thinned to dew. Barstow took me in at 4:15 a.m., and the yard guard scanned my bill like it mattered. 2 days later, parked behind a Safeway in Victorville, waiting on a backhaul, I scrolled through a local news site on my phone. The headline was small, half buried under sports. "Single vehicle rollover near mile marker 47. Driver treated and released." The timestamp said 1:20 a.m. on November 1st. The photo showed a white sedan on its roof off the right shoulder, wheels cocked at odd angles, hazard lights still blinking in the rain. No other cars. A trooper's flashlight made everything look colder than it felt that night. The article said the driver told responders he'd swerved to avoid a person in the roadway, then overcorrected and overturned. No mention of alcohol, no mention of mud, no mention of where the person went. I closed the tab. Trucks tick when they cool. Mine did. A small metal conversation, as if the heat given back to the air had language. Somewhere behind the convenience store, a trash cart rattled. People ask sometimes, family at holidays mostly, what scares me out there? Not much, I tell them. Weather. People who text. Tiredness you don't feel until it's folded under your eyelids and won't open. I don't tell them about the door handle easing against my palm through steel, or the smell of fence wire in a dry cab, or the way a pair of orange hazard blinkers can throw a kind of shadow no light should. I still run I-40. I roll past 47 and glance without meaning to. In daylight, it's nothing. A ribbon of road across scrub, a fence, a little dip where water gathers after rain. At night, it's just more dark. I keep both hands on the wheel either way. The radio plays, the CB naps, the wipers mark time. Some stretches you talk to yourself, some you don't. The last time I passed that marker in weather, there was a pumpkin pail sitting on the shoulder, handle up, wind turning it in little arcs. Might have blown out of a pickup. Might have been the same one I saw in that sedan. I didn't stop. I watched it go orange-gray-orange in the mirror until the rain made the mirror a sheet of light and took it away. I keep the headlamp in the same dash cubby. I keep the gun locked and quiet. If I hear a hand on my step again, I'll say nothing and listen. Not because I think listening will change whatever happens next, but because highways are rivers, and sometimes the current asks for your attention in a voice you recognize without knowing why. On Halloween nights now, when dispatch calls and the miles stack, I say yes. I check the wipers, wipe the handle, set the mirrors. I roll into rain or I don't. And if I see hazards burning where the mile signs read 4 and 7, I remember to look first at the road, then at the fence line, then at my own hands. 1, 2, steady on the wheel. I breathe in. If the air smells like mud and a match blown out, I don't try to make it poetry. I drive. To this day, I don't know what I saw or didn't see at mile marker 47. Maybe it was nothing more than a car, empty and wet, and my brain filling space with a person, because it's easier to be kindly fooled than honestly alone. Or maybe somebody needed help and changed their mind when a semi pulled up, embarrassed by the mess they'd made of their night. Either way, when the road narrows to rain and glass and red instrument light, that place stands up in my head like a landmark. And if you ever find yourself out there around midnight with the wind working the trailer and the wipers keeping the beat, do me a favor. Give the shoulder an extra yard. Keep your door locked. And if you think you hear the small sound of a hand testing your handle, don't yank it open. Listen, then keep rolling.